Anyway, so thank you for joining me this week
Oh, my
for the
pleasure. Thank you for
Physician
having me.
podcast. And Danny Allman, I'll give you your Sunday name. We're going to chat about, my interest really at the moment, and this is mainly because I am a woman in the middle of the menopause, Danny.
Right.
Yeah, and I found that this has brought me a lot of challenges over the last number of years, actually, sadly.
Mm.
About 5 years, I feel like this has been going on. And, a variety of symptoms which lots of women struggle with. And for me, one of the worst things was sleeplessness.
Right.
Because that really impinges on how you feel in every part of you, really,
Mm-hmm. Mm.
and then emotional challenges, anxiety, and challenges with mood is something that I've personally had difficulties with. And so um, I think for a lot of women it's a time of transition as well, with children flying the coop. Maybe they've got elderly relatives that become vulnerable and need a degree of looking after. And sometimes both of those things are happening at the same time.
Yeah.
So there's lots of challenges for people. And I know from my own personal life journey that I've been on, and luckily I am still on it, that the piece of the puzzle, or the part that is for me can be really challenging, is this mood, and just this how one feels as one goes about one's life. And I think this is something that you work with people to to help shed a light or shine a light on things that we can do to help us on this journey, Danny.
Mm.
Am I right?
Yes. Are you right? I don't want to be difficult here. I would say that in a certain to a certain degree, yes, you're right. And then to another degree, no.
Well, feel free to put me straight, Danny,
No,
please.
it's not a putting you straight. It's more, helping someone. In my experience, is it's an interesting term, because my experience has been that we can potentially facilitate helping to happen, or we can potentially facilitate change to arise, but it comes down to another individual's willingness to actually embark on that sort of, not journey, but to sort of go through that process. And of course, a lot of our sense of identity is based very much on how we are in relationship with what we would call our own experience. And so there's a sense of a me that is trying to manage our experience all the time, and in that management we have preferences, and so we try and we struggle against areas of our experience that we are in not an unhealthy relationship with, but we have resistance towards, and then we're pulled towards areas of our experience that are preferential to us. Now, unfortunately, the gamut of a human life means you're going to have to deal with all of it anyway. So either we enter into this battle of constantly trying to fight towards things being how we prefer, or we can learn how to kind of ride the whole kind of process of it with a little bit more of a kind of a healthy relationship, recognizing that fundamentally things arise and pass, things are going to change, but we can choose how we are in relationship with what comes up.
I mean, that sounds like something that would be helpful for people at that particular time. Like you're talking about the riding because it is a bit of a roller coaster, I have to say. Hormonally, definitely, there's some kind of roller coaster ride going on there. So, I mean, I'd be interested to explore any tools or techniques, or and if that's the wrong word,
Yeah, yeah, I get what you mean. So with regards to tools and techniques, my experience has been all of these things can definitely help. Um, but how we are in relationship with it is the biggest area for me to kind of polish things. Um, you know, the more we're fighting to have our experience be a certain way, the more we're fighting.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? I can definitely resonate with that from my own perspective. Uh, you know, I think people who are close to me would quite um, readily suggest there might be an element of this, the control freak uh, in my persona.
Yes, but
So,
you could equally argue, though, Philippa, that that is a component of any individual personality. How that appears can be different because for someone to tell you you're a control freak is usually a control mechanism in the first place.
you mean from them? Oh, yeah, okay.
So we all have our ways of controlling, you know.
This is true.
For some of us, we control through trying to keep things a certain way. But I would say that that is everybody's go-to in a sense. In some people, like, for example, I've experienced people, they've always got something wrong with them. There's always a problem. But within that, that has become their way of getting people to interact with them. That's become the story they tell to others. So that becomes their mechanism of controlling their experience, you know.
Mhm.
That's very much our sense of identity is the techniques and tactics that we've learned throughout our experience to try and manage it.
Mm.
Not good or
That's
bad, just
yeah.
what's been learned along the way.
Yeah, and I mean, I've had 53 years of learning,
Yep.
so I've got quite good at it. So,
Yeah.
and then if you find yourself in a place where, well, talk about anxiety for one. You know, the anxiety that I've experienced feels like an alien kind of being because it's not anything I ever really felt like I had before.
Mm.
And so that I suppose there's a newness around that uh, when your brain is taking you to this place of fear, worry, anxiety much more readily than
Mm.
ever before in the past.
Yeah.
Um, and so I had to sort of tackle that, or to feel, I don't know, how would one, what kinds of things can we think about with regards to that?
Why do you have to tackle it?
Oh, because it's horrid.
Okay. So if it's horrid, inherent within that is a judgment of it, isn't there?
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah, well, yeah, no, absolutely. Not wanting to feel that way
Ah, there we
is
go.
that the judgment? Yeah,
Yeah. I don't
definitely.
want to feel like this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and the tricky thing is, if I'm going to use a terminology, the body-mind mechanism
Hmm.
has within it inherently the capacity to experience all of it. And only when within that we have a fight against what we're experiencing, does that become a problem.
Oh, oh, that's an interesting thought, isn't it?
Well, we could go even deeper into it than that as well, and we could say, is there a me in there in the first place? This is where we start going into Advaita Vedanta, so non-dual philosophy. You know, the idea, we have the body brain, we have the brain body. um, as as growing up happens, the brain takes a certain shape, works in a certain way, um, and the body responds in a certain way. And within that is a contracted sense of a me that is somehow doing it. um, Now you could, I know we start to go off into belief systems now, but we could say, where is that me? You know, if we were dissected and opened up, we wouldn't find a central point that we could say is a me. So
Mhm.
the sense that there is a me having the experience is at the root of that kind of contracted sort of sense of being alone in the world almost, you know, being this little me in this big world.
Mm.
And if you inquire into that, where is this me? What is this me? what reveals itself. It's just this kind of tight pattern of thoughts, opinions, beliefs. It's for me, I find it particularly fascinating to explore.
Well, I mean, it is fascinating to explore, which is why I was very excited that you agreed to have a chat with me about this.
Thank you.
Yeah, because it is interesting to explore the brain. The brain fascinates me. You know, I suppose my background in physiotherapy takes me to, and having worked with people with chronic pain, for instance, painful conditions over a protracted period of time, and the way in which the brain changes and adapts, and how that is so intrinsically connected to the stuff that you're talking about, really. That, you know, the belief system, for one, is one thing you mentioned, and your life history, you know,
Yeah, and it's interesting actually that you know, it's been proven that we don't arrive into the world as a blank slate. You know, our DNA is going to be a certain way, the brain is going to develop in a certain way, and then randomly the brain picks up on certain things, and that then formulates certain patterns of thinking. But you can argue, or not argue, but you can explore within that, is there a me doing it, or is there just thought arises, response happens?
So I guess I'm not quite clear on what you mean when you say a me.
Yeah.
What?
Well, there's a sense of a me, isn't there? There's a sense of a me within the experience, this sort of space that it feels like all experience is happening to. And that me, in essence, so in yoga philosophy, they call it Maya, illusion, because that sense of a me isn't always there, is it? There are times when you're doing something, there's no sense of a me doing it, there's no doer.
No.
And there are other times throughout the day where a sense of a me returns, usually because we're not enjoying what we're doing or something like that. Yeah. So the sense of a me is actually a temporary thing anyway. And it's when that sense of a me arises that often the struggles appear. When there isn't the sense of a me, there is what is happening. And that's it, really. You know, there's what's happening. But within the me, there's all these stories about what happened and how I got to be here. And the sense of a me is actually quite, it's quite sort of tightly packaged. It's quite limited in that you'll know yourself when, like in psychotherapy and things, we'll share stories and they may help you to be more at ease with your story and things like that. And it's all really, really useful to help someone just feel a little bit better. But within that sense of a me is still a story going on. And that story appears and disappears, doesn't it? There are times when there is no story of a me there because there's just what you're doing.
Yeah. And is that the place that we want to occupy more of the time? Is that?
So this is what's fascinating about it. The me cannot occupy that space. That's the paradox of it, isn't it? That's the whole paradox of all this stuff.
Well, it is.
Yeah, it's the me that keeps you separate from that space. So the me can't do anything about it because that just adds more energy to the sense of a me. It's a process of unlearning and letting go. And the me can't let go of itself. So it's just the realization that the me is just a story.
Yeah. So, I mean, over time, how can this impact positively on our emotional state?
That's a wonderful question. I would say that it's not that it impacts positively. It's just that concept of positive and negative only really exist within the sense of a me in the first place.
Oh gosh, this is obviously a longer conversation than I.
No, but it's funny because when the sense of a me falls away, there is what's happening. You know, it's just it doesn't feel like it's happening to the concept of a me. It's just what's happening. And as I'm sure you're aware, well, this is where
don't be sure. Don't be too sure.
Language is always a subject object, isn't it? So it's dualistic in nature. So there are certain things about this that make it difficult to communicate, let's say.
Yeah.
But that sense of a me that it feels like all experience is kind of landing on, when that sense of a me is allowed to just, not even allowed, but just falls away, there is what's happening, but it isn't referenced to preference anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, because what is happening is always a changing state, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. So, and I mean, and that fits very much well, does it? I'm just about to say that fits with the ideas of mindfulness. Does that fit? Does it fit with that, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, for me, mindfulness is kind of it's a modern term. It's just kind of awareness and mindfulness, I think, are kind of the same thing. But
Oh, okay.
inherent within that is the concept that there is a me that can be aware of. There is a me that can be mindful of.
So can that be unhelpful then in some ways?
Up to a point, I would say.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Because
I mean, I have some thoughts around that as well, because we sometimes, I remember recommending a person to go and explore some of these concepts of mindfulness approaches. Someone in
sure.
chronic.
And I teach meditation, so there's a paradox in that as well.
Yeah. Well, so they went away, and in being really mindful about the pain, it kind of got worse. So I mean,
Oh dear.
there are there's ways of handling these things, I suppose, is the thing, is it?
Yeah, but sometimes I would also put forward the idea sometimes things get worse before they improve, though, don't they? So, for example,
Yeah, that's true, actually.
often when people sit down and start a meditation practice, it freaks them out, because all of a sudden they're sat there with all the stuff that would usually be creating reaction and response and trying to just be still. And it's not without any qualities. It's not a good or a bad thing as such. That there tends to be, for anyone that I would say is seeking, there's a period of time where practices and techniques are explored. But until we reach the stage that recognition that there isn't a me that can get somewhere, those things tend to be the path that people stay on. The paths that you'll notice, the paths that are more popular, whether it's a belief system or some kind of practice, are the ones that offer something to the idea of a me, that there is a me in there that can get somewhere. When the realization that the me has just been a story that appears and disappears, and we not let go, but that me is just sort of like
fall away.
Then what's happening is what's happening, and there's no need for anything else.
That sounds like quite a nice place to be, though. With
It's interesting though, isn't it? Because there isn't a place to be. That's the whole paradox of this is where the language becomes a little bit of a barrier to an extent.
Yeah, I can see that.
It's not a place to be, it's just what is.
Yeah. So breath work, meditation, practices, these are things that I've found beneficial in kind of dealing with some of the biochemistry that's going on in my body, shall we say.
100%. These things, in my experience, are useful tools and techniques to support the kind of like the body-mind mechanism. 100%. Yeah, 100%.
And this is something you do, isn't it? You teach and you practice yourself.
Yeah, that's my I suppose that's the way I work with others. Yeah, through yoga practices, breath work, meditation, and then the talking stuff as well. Yeah.
And I think, I mean, I told you I'm currently training to do in Hatha yoga, and although I was about to say something about how old I am, which really speaks to the fact that I'm obviously not very happy about it. We could talk about that at some length, I'm quite sure. So my state of evolution, it took a while, Danny, that's all I'm going to say. It's taken a while. I love Movement is my thing. You know, I since I was a child, really, I suppose. And it's funny, really, because I didn't always love it. I remember when my dad used to force me to do cross country running.
How did
I
he
mean,
force you?
hey, what?
How did he force you?
How did he force me? Well,
Did he do it with
uh,
like a
he
stick?
provided me with the equipment. Uh, he used to transport me to the venue.
And then like drive home and you had to run back?
I wasn't old enough. Yeah, well, it's funny you should say that. Yeah, but he took me to the race. I suppose once I was on the starting line, I didn't have much choice. I mean, I did, but then I didn't. I chose to try and do cross country running. I suppose it was very
Right.
cold and wet and horrible.
Did you get a sense of was there like a competitive drive that started to develop?
Oh, not really. Never in me. Never. I
Right.
was never competitive in that way. I was rubbish. I couldn't do it. I
Yeah.
was the back. I was getting the consolation clap, Danny.
Right. So do you think it was more just the sort of the physical impact of it and how that felt that sort of drove the pursuit to continue with movement?
Yeah. So I kind of went through a phase where I was forced to do it, and then I stopped.
Yeah.
And then I kind of rediscovered it again, all of my own accord, I suppose. I was training to be a physiotherapist, and I joined the orienteering club with my friend, and we used to go off into the countryside. And really, it was kind of optional whether you ran or you walked, and you navigated yourself around the countryside, and then you went to a coffee shop and had afternoon tea.
Nice.
Back in the day, I don't know if the pubs were open. Maybe that's why we went for afternoon tea.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, so afternoon tea it was, and then I don't know. I think I said this to you before when we were speaking that say eventually I got to the situation where 6 days a week I was in the gym and doing all my sports, and that really took me to a place of feeling, you know, the biochemistry
Yeah.
kicked in, and that really got me to a place where I liked how I felt. And then, of course, I kept doing it because of that, I suppose. I liked it.
Yeah.
Lots of people don't get to that stage, do they?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think you know, there's a fragility there in all of us, isn't there? And I think the areas that we learn in life get us the approval or reassurance we need are often the areas that we then integrate as our patterns. And for many
Danny, that's
people,
so profound, isn't it? That's so
no,
profound.
not really.
Oh, it is. It is. It is, yeah, because all my dad wanted me to do was be good at running,
Right.
and my brother was, and I wasn't,
Okay.
and so yeah. Anyway, so I don't know. Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? So then I went mad with the exercise. Loved it.
Yeah.
I still love it, but I think you know, it's evolved, and so coming to yoga is a bit more of a, for me. Um, Oh, well, it's a bit more of a balanced approach. I don't know if that's the right way of putting it.
Can be.
Can be.
Perhaps you've experienced classes where I would argue that
Oh,
balance isn't there, in
true.
the sense that you know, there are styles out there which are very very sort of not just strength but very physical.
Yes.
Not that that isn't balanced,
Mm,
but sometimes that comes at the
expensive.
exclusion of
Oh,
some of the other components. But
yeah.
that, in my experience, isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just the individual body mind is drawn to a certain intensity of practice, and sometimes that intensity of practice over a period of time can then lend itself to someone becoming more aware of other things.
Yeah.
I think the different styles suit different preferences, and that
Yeah.
in that is often that can be a little bit of a trap itself. In that if somebody's quite kind of driven and high energy, their inclination will be towards a stronger practice. But maybe what would help them the most, if we argue the fact that they need it, would be something that encouraged them to slow down a little bit occasionally. So I think we have to kind of play around and explore all of it, recognize our preference, but also, you know, do a little bit of work on the other areas if balance is what we say we're aiming for.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, for a lot of people that I work with, it is what you're aiming for.
Mm.
So yeah, and that approach, but these multifaceted approaches, you know, I just, the physical body, the emotional. You talked about something, a model that you favour, and in, you know, the three. What did you tell me about?
Oh, the sort of 3 zones of awareness. So yeah, we have our somatic experience, don't we? What we're feeling within the body. We have our conceptual experience. So, you know, the thoughts that arise and pass. We have our sensory experience. So, you know, what's coming from the outside. And we often have a preferential zone, let's say. We have an area that we're more drawn to. And usually that area, I would argue, isn't necessarily by choice. It's just the area that has, the way our brain has formed has meant that that's the areas that have been explored. And often it will be the area that gives us the most reassurance and approval from the world. So if somebody feels or has a judgment of themselves, they're not very good at physical disciplines, you know, often that results in them becoming a bit avoidant of that, which is why the challenge can feel really difficult for adults who have never really got into physical exercise to start again, because it's an area that perhaps reveals shame and embarrassment, and you know, they feel uncomfortable in the clothing they're wearing when they're exercising around people, and they may have a lot of judgments about themselves in those areas. Put them in an intellectual format, they feel fantastic. You know, so we all have zones that perhaps we feel less confident in and subsequently more avoidant of.
Yeah, and that, I mean, that's the default, isn't it, of the brain, of avoidance.
Yeah, because it's fundamentally seeking to keep us safe. You know?
Yeah, keep us safe. But then that becomes something that, you know, avoiding becomes part of the problem then sometimes. And I say problem very reservedly around you, Danny.
No, don't do that, please.
Oh, okay.
There's no need to start to, you know, question what you're saying. Just,
all right.
Just let it go, and I'll give you a quick slap back if you say the wrong thing.
Okay.
No, I won't really. I'm just joking.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, you're right. We don't want to talk about problems, but you know, maybe an area to explore.
No, we can talk about them. We can talk about problems. It's just another word, isn't it? But for me, inherent within the word problem is usually that means we're seeing it as a problem. So then we've got to explore, you know, our relationship with that a little bit.
Yeah, and I do know from my perspective, language is very powerful, and that, you know, what one person says and thinks they've said, and another person hears it differently, and
yeah,
I mean,
yeah, it's a particular area of fascination for myself, because once I started to go down the route of learning more about use of language, it's, at least in my experience, impossible to start looking at language and how you speak. I mean, if you're just reading about it, that's fine, you know, understanding where words come from and that kind of thing. That intellectual understanding is fine, but actually exploring that in communication with others requires you to pay attention to how you're thinking a little bit more. So language is a great mirror into you know, our thought processes,
our inner workings.
Yeah, or what appears as to be our inner workings, not just
So coming back to bringing us back to some things for people who, you know, maybe they're on this journey of hormonal fluctuations, you know, finding that things that used to feel fine feel less fine than they used to do. Maybe emotions appear that you didn't know were there when your children start to disappear off to university or whatever. You know, have you got any nuggets of advice or information, things people can do?
Yeah, for me, I always share the, I don't think it's a concept, it's just been what I've experienced. People, circumstances and situations simply just reveal to us what's there for us. Now that can become an area of contention and struggle, or it can become an invitation to kind of just accept more of our experience of ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, I like what you've said there, to be honest, and I can see that I'm railing against it, and you know, not for whatever reason, and maybe a little bit more of the going with the flow and taking the rough with the smooth. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, inherent within that though is the concept that you have a choice.
Oh,
and
okay.
I think, do you have a you know, do you have a choice whether or not you go with the flow? Because it's going to happen anyway, isn't it?
It's going to happen anyway. Yeah. So
you could argue you are going with the flow, but in the way that that presents itself within the body-mind mechanism of Philippa. Because you're still here, so fundamentally whatever going with the flow has meant for you has worked.
I'm still here. I'm hanging by a thread, but I'm still here.
To be fair, you look all right. You're sat there wearing bright pink, although
yeah, look at me. I love these colours. Day glow. You can't miss me then, you see. Well, it's definitely food for thought, Danny. And I shall continue to follow your wonderful Facebook group that you have, and watch your short video presentations, and continue to have my mind. What should I say? Explored.
Yeah,
No,
that's an interesting expression. I mean, you could say that's just the response that comes up.
Well, it is, yeah.
Yeah, that's just the response that comes up.
Curiosity.
Yeah. And perhaps that's just an inherent quality of how your brain is. There's a curiosity.
Yeah, I'm definitely nosy, which is why I love doing this podcast. So thank you.
Nosiness certainly appears for me. One question I was going to ask you is, earlier you mentioned anxiety.
Oh, I did.
Now, I'm never quite clear on what that means for each individual. You know, how does that present itself? When you use the word anxiety, how would you describe that as a sort of physical experience?
Oh, well, you know, heart rate. The thing for me that happens, and this probably, you know, it could be unique to me, is a sense of my stomach literally doing that.
Okay.
You know, my stomach turns over, shakiness, you know, right. That kind of jitteriness. And for me, a lot of kind of racing thoughts in your mind, going round and round, and not really getting anywhere with that.
Okay. Do you find that the processes in the body lend themselves to the brain going in that way, or the appearance of those thoughts?
I think, yeah, I mean, undoubtedly, it's all very connected in that sense. And then it feels just, I suppose that's perhaps always been my default. You know, that's perhaps always been there, but it feels a lot more apparent and a lot more problematic, I suppose, you know, than it might have done before.
Yeah. So when these feelings arise in your stomach, the response, or what appears to be the response in terms of how your thinking goes, is it one of kind of, I need to change this, I don't like this, it's not comfortable?
Oh no, no. It's whatever the thoughts around the thing that's going on are.
Okay.
You know, I suppose you know, like women, menopausal women will relate to the fact that your memory is awful, and so in my professional life as a physiotherapist, the danger of not remembering something is potentially quite hazardous. You know, forgetting to write something down, forgetting to, you know, if somebody walks into my consulting room and if I can't, and I've misremembered the last time I saw them, what we did, or the last, and I know I've written it down, but you don't always have time to read everything that you've written verbatim. And so, you know, you jump to a conclusion and sometimes you misremember, or there's a, you know, you worry that you won't remember what happened to somebody. And then we start to go down the rabbit hole of litigation, you know, loss of your professional standing, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So it's a very real.
Yeah, for sure. And it sounds like it spirals into a place that would feel quite uncomfortable to an extent. That sort of
very uncomfortable
of potential outcome that could be there as a response.
So what's accentuated is how far you go with that. You know, before you might have had it briefly and then it goes away and you don't think about it again, but then you know, the tendency now would be to ruminate a bit more on those kinds of.
Right. Okay, I see. So do you feel a little bit like you're questioning your sense of identity of yourself now? The mind appears to be changing somewhat.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely feel that shift. Definitely, because when you know, your career feels like something that is you, you know, it's hard to separate the two. So you're talking about those three circles, you know, the somatic, the cognitive, the, you know, whatever. And so, yeah, that was my erring towards one of those spheres, was my job and my.
Yeah, sure. And this is where, if we go back a little bit, this is where any fixed sense of an identity becomes the kind of the only hurdle, really. Because without that fixed sense of a Philippa who is this, what you have is just what is happening to the body-mind mechanism right now.
Yeah, and that would be a lot easier to accept, wouldn't it, I suppose, if it was just that.
Yeah, and yeah, with the story of a Philippa in there and how that should appear and behave and all that kind of stuff, there's going to come a resistance is going to come up. Yeah, because what's happening doesn't match the story of how Philippa should be experiencing it.
Yeah, that's it. Oh yeah. So it's hard to rewrite those stories.
Well, if we take it to that level again, it's because there isn't someone that can rewrite it. There is just the appearance of how the brain works.
Yeah, well, that's right. I mean, the different parts of the brain doing the different jobs, all talking to one another. Yeah. It gets quite busy in there.
Yeah, it does. That's the brain. Yeah, but within that isn't a Philippa doing it. That's just the brain doing its thing. Yeah, the struggle arises from a sense that a Philippa has to do this. Oh, now the Philippa's not doing it the way the Philippa used to do it.
Yeah. Well, so that would be interesting to dig deeper, but I think we'd need a whole nother hour for that, Danny.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you could argue that you don't need to anyway, because you're all right.
I'm all right. Yeah, let's finish on a high. These poor people have heard it quite enough about me and my. Yeah, finish on a high.
But you finished there with apologising a little bit.
Oh, sorry, Danny.
And you did it again.
I did it again.
But do you know what, for me, Philippa, has been the biggest thing that has helped, if I can say me,
yeah,
is being able to just laugh at the story of ourselves. Yeah, really being able to just laugh at the story of ourselves. There may be all sorts of justifications in your story as to why it's not okay to laugh at yourself, but we can laugh at that as well.
yeah, and I'm a big, anyone who knows me knows I like a bit of humour.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great place to finish.
Cool.
Thank you.
Listen, Philippa, thank you so much for your time. I've enjoyed chatting to you. It's been really nice.
Thank you, Danny. Me too.